Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be back.
Today, we're going to be looking at a really important tool, and I think this one is especially useful for folks in a lot of different fields.
Definitely, it's a foundational tool.
So we're going to be diving into the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale Screener, the CSSRS screener.
Yeah, a lot of people just call it the CSSR screener.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful,
Yeah.
but it's all about, assessing suicide risk.
Right, and
Yeah,
understanding what level of risk somebody might be at.
exactly. So, how do we actually use this thing? What are the questions we should be asking?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, actually. It's designed to be easy to use, even for people who aren't mental health professionals.
That makes sense. So it's not just for therapists or clinicians or, people like that.
Right, anybody who might come into contact with someone at risk could potentially use this.
Okay, cool. So let's break it down. What's the first thing we need to know?
The screener starts with two initial questions, and they're kind of like a gateway to the rest of the assessment.
A gateway. Okay, so what are those two questions?
The first one is, have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up?
Have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? Okay, so what's the thinking behind that kind of question?
Well, it's getting at what we call passive suicidal ideation.
Passive suicidal ideation. So
Yeah.
not actively planning to do it, but
Right. It's more about those feelings of hopelessness or a desire to escape pain, even if it's not a concrete plan.
okay, I see. So someone might not be like, I'm going to end my life, but they might be thinking like, man, I wish I wasn't here.
Exactly. And those feelings are important to acknowledge because they can be a sign that someone's struggling.
Right, right. So that's the first question. What's the second one?
The second question is more direct. It asks, have you actually had any thoughts of killing yourself?
Okay, so that's getting more into active suicidal ideation.
Exactly. Now, this is where the screener kind of branches out. Depending on the answer to that second question, we go in different directions.
So like a choose your own adventure kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. If the answer to question 2 is yes, then we move on to questions 3 through 6. But if it's no, we skip ahead to question 6.
Interesting. Okay, so let's say someone answers yes to that second question about having thoughts of killing themselves. What happens next?
Then we ask question 3, which is, have you been thinking about how you might do this?
Have you been thinking about how you might do this? Okay, so thinking about methods and stuff.
Right. And there's an example in the materials that I think is helpful. It says, I thought about taking an overdose, but I never made a specific plan as to when, where, or how I would actually do it, and I would never go through with it.
Okay. So even just considering a method, even without a solid plan, can be a red flag.
Exactly. It shows that those thoughts are starting to become more concrete, even if it's still hypothetical.
Right, right. Okay, so that's question 3. What about question 4?
Question 4 asks, have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them?
Have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them? So now we're really getting into the nitty-gritty. Is there a desire to actually do it?
Right. It's about distinguishing between, fleeting thoughts and thoughts that are accompanied by a real urge to act.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about question 5?
Question 5 is even more direct. It asks, have you started to work out or worked out the details of how to kill yourself? Do you intend to carry out this plan?
Whoa, okay, that's heavy. So now we're talking about a specific plan, potentially with steps already taken.
That's right. This is where we're getting into a higher level of risk. Question 5 is really trying to identify people who might be in imminent danger.
Got it. And then finally, question 6.
Question 6 asks, have you ever done anything, started to do anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life?
Have you ever done anything, started to do anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life? Okay. So this is looking at past behavior, even if it didn't result in a completed suicide attempt.
Exactly. The source material gives some examples here, like collecting pills, or getting a gun, giving away possessions, or even holding a gun but changing your mind.
Wow, those are pretty intense examples. So this question is trying to get a sense of how serious someone has been about suicide in the past.
Right. It helps us understand the context of their current risk level.
Okay, so we've gone through all the questions. Now, how do we actually use the answers to assess someone's risk?
The CSSRS screener has a specific way of categorizing risk levels. A yes to questions 4, 5, and 6 would indicate high risk.
High risk. Okay. What about moderate risk?
Moderate risk would be if someone answers yes to question 3, but no to question 5.
Yes to question 3, which was about thinking about methods, but no to question 5, which was about having a specific plan.
Got it. So what happens after we've assessed someone's risk level? Well, it's important to remember that this assessment is just a starting point. It's not a diagnosis or a prediction, but rather a guide to inform further action.
So what kind of action should we take?
If someone is assessed as high risk, then immediate intervention is absolutely necessary. We need to connect them with mental health resources, create a safety plan, and make sure they're not alone.
Right, that makes sense. What about someone who's assessed as moderate risk?
For moderate risk, we'd still want to provide support and resources, but the urgency might be slightly less than for high risk. We'd also want to assess for other things like substance use or any other mental health concerns.
Okay, so this screener really helps us understand what next steps to take. Like it's like a roadmap.
Exactly. It helps us move from, not knowing what to do to having a clear path forward.
This has been really helpful. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to use the CSSRS screener now.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Remember, this tool is all about recognizing the signs of suicidal ideation and getting people the help they need.
absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. I think it's given all of us a lot to think about.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, remember, you're not alone. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help. There are resources available and people who care.
And remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do is just listen. Let someone know that you're there for them.
Well said. Until next time, stay curious and take care of yourselves and each other.